A woman was tragically murdered by a stranger over a petty argument, all while her helpless child, Ji-young, witnessed the horrific act. The killer, Seung-soo, was arrested and brought to trial. It was revealed that he had a history of similar crimes. Despite this, the court ruled there was no intent to kill. Seung-soo showed some effort to reconcile with the victim's family and was undergoing mental health treatment. As a result, he was sentenced to just 3.5 years in prison. Ji-young, overwhelmed with anger and grief, could only cry at the unfair verdict. Before being taken away, Seung-soo mocked and frightened the young boy. Fast forward 12 years, Seung-soo hadn't changed. One day, he brutally attacked a bus driver for calling the cops on him, continuing to beat him severely. As he intimidated other passengers, he noticed someone outside the bus but brushed it off. On his way home, he was confronted by the same man. Ji-young. Now grown up, Ji-young used brass knuckles to relentlessly beat Seung-soo until he died, avenging his mother's death. Ji-young had since joined the police academy and impressed his instructor, Jun Yeob, with his exceptional judo skills. By day, he was a dedicated officer in training. By night, he became a vigilante, targeting criminals who escaped justice. One evening, Ji-young stopped two men harassing a woman by urinating on her window. He incapacitated them and disappeared, leaving the woman in shock. Later, he read about a doctor still practicing medicine despite being convicted of sexually assaulting and filming patients, a 6-month sentence with no loss of his license. Furious at the system's failure, Ji-young took matters into his own hands. He stormed into the doctor's office, knocked him to the ground, and warned him to quit medicine or face dire consequences. Meanwhile, journalist Mirio presented her boss, Chung Hye-in, with evidence of violent crimes where the perpetrators, free due to legal loopholes, were being targeted by a mysterious vigilante. She argued that the public admired this dark hero and that covering the story would boost ratings. Her boss agreed, and soon the news spotlighted the vigilante's actions. The woman Ji-young had saved gave an emotional interview, thanking the vigilante for changing her life. Watching the broadcast, Ji-young felt a sense of fulfillment. Hiding his bruised hand, he scrolled through articles praising the vigilante, knowing his actions were making an impact. Meanwhile, the news channel is thrilled as their vigilante show becomes a hit. Mirio starts noticing a pattern. The vigilante only acts on weekends. To boost ratings, she suggests baiting him by exposing another criminal. The channel broadcasts a report revealing the identity of child sex offender Do-kyung, who was sentenced to only 7 years for assaulting a student, citing temporary insanity. Now released, Do-kyung is living freely, sparking public outrage. Protesters gather outside his home, demanding harsher punishment. Mirio, waiting near the scene, is pleased her plan is working. Ji-young, watching the news, decides to act. He accesses police files to gather information on Do-kyung. That night, Do-kyung leaves his apartment, with Mirio tailing him, but she loses him at the port. Later, Do-kyung, disguised as a delivery worker, arrives at his victim's apartment. A police officer guarding the door confronts him, but Do-kyung stabs the officer and throws acid on his face. Hearing the commotion, the girl steps out and is caught by Do-kyung. He blames her for his misfortune and intends to kill her, believing everything would have been fine if he had killed her earlier. Just as he's about to attack, Ji-young intervenes, landing a devastating blow that sends Do-kyung down the stairs. Despite resistance, Do-kyung is no match for Ji-young's judo skills. Ji-young breaks his arms, punches his face, and hurls him into a window. Defeated, Do-kyung begs for mercy, but Ji-young forces him to write an apology on the wall using his own blood. Mirio, heading toward the girl's apartment, runs into Ji-young just as he finished the job. She sneaks inside, posing as a resident, and sees the blooded message on the wall, a warning from the vigilante promising justice for the wicked. News of Do-kyung's death spreads, solidifying public belief in the vigilante's existence. While many see him as a hero, the police label him a murderer, accusing him of premeditating the kill. The police chief orders Officer Yoon to stop the media from glorifying the vigilante and instead portray him as a criminal. Officer Jun Yeob, brought in to assist, inspects the scene and notices the vigilante left no evidence, suggesting he knows police investigation methods. Officer Yoon shares how public complaints are flooding in, supporting the vigilante's actions. Meanwhile, Mirio's news company faces criticism for sensationalizing crime. Chung Hye-in is frustrated, but Mirio argues that their ratings are soaring. She even identifies 3 more cases to bait the vigilante. The next day, the news covers a case about Du Yip, a man who broke into his ex-employer's home with runaway teens and brutally murdered the family. Du Yip blamed a young boy involved and received a light sentence due to his age. Once again, justice slipped through the cracks, leaving the public outraged and the vigilante's next move anticipated. Ji Young watches the news and decides to investigate further. Late at night, he sneaks out and gathers information about Du Yip. Through social media, he discovers Du Yip frequently visits a club. A negative comment on Du Yip's post, where he threatens to kill the commenter, confirms his criminal tendencies. Ji Young goes to the club with friends and observes Du Yip interacting with teenagers. A girl reveals that Du Yip is a drug dealer, prompting Ji Young to dig deeper. Ji Young uncovers that Du Yip's drug operations are structured so only the dealers get caught, avoiding traceable online transactions. One weekend, Ji Young tails Du Yip to a location where he sells drugs to dealers. When Du Yip returns to his car, he finds a note saying, "Turn yourself in," with a number linked to a D agent. Assuming someone's after him, Du Yip orders his network to stay low. Later, the club is raided by police, forcing Du Yip to flee. He rushes home, only to find his door open and Ji Young waiting. Ji Young pours gasoline on Du Yip's money as a warning. When Du Yip shows no remorse for his crimes, Ji Young burns the money, sparking a violent fight. Ji Young overpowers him, using a chain to strangle him and repeatedly punching him. Finally, Ji Young shows Du Yip a video of the family he murdered, forcing him to apologize to their spirits. The next day, police discover Du Yip's body. Public outrage over the vigilante killings escalates, prompting authorities to form a special task force. Despite the police framing the vigilante as a criminal, the public views him as a hero. Detective Jo Hoon, leading the investigation, interrogates a club patron, Sung-il, who initially refuses to cooperate. Jo Hoon intimidates him by bending a coin and dangling him off a railing. Terrified, Sung-il confesses to his crimes and reveals that Du Yip was told to contact the D. Meanwhile, copycat vigilantes emerge across the country, with 18 incidents of people taking justice into their own hands. One group of teens sets a criminal's car on fire before attacking him fatally. Jo Hoon is determined to capture the real vigilante before more chaos unfolds. Ji Young identifies another case involving Gyu-ho, a truck driver who intentionally ran over a delivery man and was sentenced to just 1 year in prison. The victim's mother confronts Gyu-ho, who arrogantly claims he's paid his dues. Ji Young realizes Gyu-ho has no remorse and takes action. That night, while Gyu-ho relaxes at a bathhouse, the vigilante confronts him. Submerging Gyu-ho's head underwater, the masked vigilante kills him without allowing him to repent. However, this vigilante is revealed to be an imposter, not Ji Young. Ji Young is helping an elderly neighbor in his neighborhood when he sees a news report about Gyu-ho's death being labeled as another vigilante killing. Jo Hoon investigates the scene but finds no clues about the real vigilante. Meanwhile, a rival news channel airs a show discussing recently released criminals convicted of heinous acts. The fake vigilante takes the bait, targeting and killing them without giving them a chance to repent. The fake vigilante later sends a video to a news station, addressing the public. In the video, he expresses empathy for victims and admits his actions are criminal, but declares he won't stop. Ji Young is frustrated, knowing this fake vigilante is ruining his reputation. Jo Hoon, on the other hand, believes if the real vigilante isn't caught soon, he'll feel untouchable and take things too far. Soon, the police catch a supposed vigilante, but Jo Hoon instantly recognizes he's a fake. When Officer Yoon asks how he knows, Jo Hoon says the real vigilante wouldn't act cowardly when caught. Later, Ji Young's elderly neighbor is collecting cardboard when a man named Sun-do yells at her for being in his way. As she pauses to respond, Sun-do hits her with his car, severely injuring her. A nearby shopkeeper steps in to confront Sun-do, but instead of apologizing, Sun-do assaults him. A scuffle breaks out, with the shopkeeper gaining the upper hand. Police arrive shortly after and arrest Sun-do for causing harm, but the shopkeeper is also taken in for defending the old woman. The incident garners media attention, exposing flaws in the legal system. Furious over the attack on his neighbor, Ji Young starts investigating. Meanwhile, Sun-do's brother tries to intimidate the elderly woman into settling the case for money, ignoring her critical condition. Ji Young follows the brother to his hideout, swiftly subduing him with a kick and strangling him, warning him to leave the woman alone. Elsewhere, Mirio devises a plan to monitor the hospital where Soon-do is receiving treatment, hoping to catch the vigilante. Jo-hoon and his team also arrive, setting up surveillance. As night falls, Ji-young uses a diversion by tampering with an officer's car to slip into Soon-do's hospital room. There, he confronts Soon-do, demanding he confess his guilt in court and accept the harshest punishment. Ji-young warns him of worse consequences if he refuses. As the police realize the diversion, they rush to Soon-do's room. Jo-hoon spots Ji-young, disguised as a doctor, but Ji-young manages to escape before being caught. Soon-do decides to surrender and calls his brother, but the fake vigilante appears and kills him by throwing him out of the hospital window. Ji-young witnesses the fake vigilante escaping in an ambulance. Determined to uncover the truth, Ji-young chases after him, boarding the ambulance to confront the imposter and unravel the mystery behind his actions. Driving the ambulance to a rooftop parking lot, the killer praises Ji-young for his actions and expresses admiration for his work. He reveals that he has been helping Ji-young from the shadows, erasing his tracks so the police can't catch him. He admits to tampering with the hospital's CCTV cameras and proposes becoming Ji-young's ally, claiming they could team up to target bigger criminals. However, Ji-young sees him as nothing more than a cold-blooded murderer who doesn't give his victims a chance to redeem themselves. A fierce fight breaks out, with the imposter vigilante proving to be just as strong as Ji-young. During the struggle, Ji-young shares his perspective on vigilantism, explaining that he only steps in where the law falls short. He criticizes the imposter for tarnishing his reputation through reckless killings. The fight continues until Ji-young manages to pin the imposter against the wall. The fake vigilante begs for help, offering to reveal his identity by removing his mask. Ignoring the plea, Ji-young tells him to find his own path and leaves. Meanwhile, Jo-hoon combs through the hospital staff records for clues. Mirio reviews a video showing Ji-young, but finds his face obscured. As Ji-young tends to his wounds, he receives a message from the fake vigilante offering to act as his alibi. Ji-young, however, remains unmoved. The next day, the imposter vigilante's identity is revealed. Jo Gangok, the vice chairman of DK Group and a key sponsor of the broadcasting station where Mirio works. Upon learning Mirio has footage of Ji-young, Gangok goes to the station and proposes sponsoring her to freely discuss vigilante-related topics in her reports. Mirio, however, refuses to let anyone control her work. Gangok then reveals his admiration for the vigilante and seizes the USB containing the footage, erasing any evidence. At the same time, the police analyze the evidence collected at the hospital, noting the meticulous planning and deep understanding of their investigation techniques. Jo-hoon begins suspecting that the vigilante may have ties to the police force. To discuss this theory, Jo-hoon visits the police academy and briefly crosses paths with Ji-young. Though he recalls his encounter with the vigilante, Jo-hoon dismisses the possibility that Ji-young could be involved. During a meeting with Professor Jun-yeub, they both theorize that the vigilante might be a police officer. Afterward, Jo-hoon leaves the academy while Ji-young observes him from a distance. Later, Jo-hoon heads to a restaurant to review CCTV footage, but discovers that someone has already accessed the videos. Realizing it was Soon-do's brother, Sun-il, Jo-hoon tracks him down to his hideout. Confronting the gang, Jo-hoon easily defeats the thugs in a one-sided brawl. Sun-il locks the security gate, but Jo-hoon breaks through with sheer strength, subduing the remaining gang members. He warns Sun-il to stop conducting his own investigations or face dire consequences. Back at the academy, Professor Jun-yeub notices Ji-young's injuries during class and asks about them. Ji-young claims they are from a practice session with his gym teacher. Before Jun-yeub can press further, a police officer arrives with a young woman who thanks Ji-young for saving her from harassment by drunk men the previous night. Initially confused, Ji-young quickly realizes this is Gangok's doing and plays along. When questioned about his fabricated story regarding his injuries, Ji-young explains he avoided mentioning the incident because a fight involving a police student could create unnecessary complications. It dawns on Ji-young that he might need Gangok's support to continue his mission. The next day, Mirio visits her friend Deseok at his office. When she asks about a company named Sewell Future Resources, Deseok reveals its involvement in multiple illegal operations, including running Korea's largest illegal gambling site and engaging in drug trafficking. He shares that Do-yeep, the drug dealer Ji-young killed, had ties to the company. Furthermore, Kim Sam-do, the company's owner, is notorious for his criminal behavior and recently avoided charges despite strong evidence against him. Dae-seok suggests that Mi-ryo join him to meet an actor named Yeon-jak, who claims to have information about the company. Upon arriving at the actor's house, they are shocked to find Yeon-jak hanging from a rope. The pair tries to convince the police that it was murder, but their claims are dismissed after a suicide note is found nearby. They are told to leave the police station. Frustrated, Mi-ryo asks Dae-seok about the possible location of the evidence. Dae-seok reveals that the actor had changed the meeting place at the last moment, hinting that the evidence might still be there. Meanwhile, Ji-young meets Gangok near the bus terminal. A girl sent by Gangok leads him to a meeting spot, but it becomes clear that Jo-hoon has been monitoring Ji-young. After the girl leaves, Jo-hoon approaches Ji-young, introducing himself as the head of the team investigating the vigilante. Jo-hoon expresses suspicion that Ji-young may be the vigilante and warns him to stop his actions. Jo-hoon explains that his goal is not to arrest the vigilante, but to prevent him from continuing. He believes arresting the vigilante could turn him into a hero and give him public support. Later, Ji-young contacts Gangok, asking him to clone Jo-hyun's phone so that he can consider working with Gangok. At the same time, Mi-ryo heads to the location specified by the actor. It turns out to be a container holding illegal servers for C's operations. Mi-ryo records the computers and uncovers evidence of QQ coin mining. Just as she discovers this, an unknown person enters the container after noticing Dae-seok's car outside. Mi-ryo hides under a table, but the man finds her. Dae-seok intervenes, grabbing the intruder from behind and bravely protecting Mi-ryo. Unfortunately, Dae-seok succumbs to multiple stab wounds, sacrificing himself to give Mi-ryo time to escape. As the attacker tries to catch her, Mi-ryo manages to get away. Later, she returns with the police, only to find the container empty. There's no sign of the computers or Dae-seok's body. Meanwhile, Jo-hoon receives a call from Chief Superintendent General Jae-hyop, who had assigned him the task of catching the vigilante. Jae-hyop tells Jo-hoon to end the vigilantism, emphasizing that a realignment is approaching and the situation should not interfere with progress. Meanwhile, Mi-ryo's news channel airs another episode exposing C's illicit activities. The report reveals that C's chairman, Sam Do, orchestrated an illegal 800 billion QQ coin cryptocurrency exchange, supported by traces found in the container Mi-ryo visited. The broadcast also includes chat screenshots from the actor, which link Chief General Jae-hyop to the C company. Jae-hyop is shown strategizing with Sam Do, confirming his involvement. The person responsible for Dae-seok's murder is revealed to be Mr. Bang, who is frequently hired by Sam Do for illegal activities. Mr. Bang is assigned to abduct Mi-ryo, and he sends a man to her office to carry out the task. The man kidnaps Mi-ryo, but before he can drive away, Jo-hoon arrives and delivers a strong slap, knocking him out. Jo-hoon warns Mi-ryo not to give the vigilante any more targets, as happened in the C case. Mi-ryo rejects his advice, leading Jo-hoon to warn her about the consequences. The man who attacked Mi-ryo regains consciousness in Jo-hyun's car. He tries to resist, but is quickly subdued by Jo-hoon, who forces him to surrender. Under questioning, the man reveals that Sam Do uses Mr. Bang's services for various tasks, including Mi-ryo's abduction, which he was ordered to carry out by Mr. Bang. Jo-hoon heads to the location the man recently visited and discovers it's a farm owned by Sam Do, where he carries out his criminal activities. Jo-hoon grabs his shield from the car and engages in a fierce fight with Sam Do's men. Using his remarkable strength, Jo-hoon takes down each opponent, delivering powerful blows and defending himself with his shield. In the end, he successfully incapacitates all of Sam Do's men in his way. Shortly after the police arrive at the scene, they discover dozens of bodies, with some being eaten by pigs. Instead of exposing Sam Do's activities, Jo-hoon manipulates the situation, framing the men at the farm as the vigilantes. The police paint Sam Do's farm as a vigilante murder factory, even falsely claiming they found the DNA of vigilantes' victims to support their fabricated story. To counter this false narrative, Ji-young targets one of Sam Do's associates, Yoon-sik, a drug offender with 3 prior sexual assault charges. Just as Yoon-sik is about to attack another woman, Ji-young intervenes, ambushing him from behind and knocking him to the ground. After subduing him, Ji-young takes a diary containing crucial information about Sam Do. Later, news channels report on the incident, portraying Yoon-sik's death as the work of the vigilante. The broadcasts also reveal a message left at the scene, exposing the false story created by Jo Hyun. This event disrupts Jo Hyun's plans and leaves him reeling. Meanwhile, Mirio finds herself surprisingly upbeat after being fired by her boss, who accused her of glorifying a criminal group by calling them vigilantes. However, with the vigilantes' recent actions, Mirio feels vindicated, proving she was right all along. When Ji Young returns home, he encounters Jo Hyun, who follows him to a bridge. Although Ji Young briefly escapes, Jo Hyun eventually catches up. He urges Ji Young to abandon his vigilante efforts, offering to guide him out of the mess he's created. Ji Young refuses, accusing Jo Hyun of following orders and working unofficially, and questions why he should listen to someone like that. A fight breaks out, with Jo Hyun easily overpowering Ji Young, dismissing him as no real threat. Jo Hyun insists that the police will handle the chaos Ji Young has caused, emphasizing that he has crossed the line by taking the law into his own hands. Despite the beating, Ji Young stands firm, refusing to give up his mission to help those left vulnerable by an unjust system. Frustrated, Jo Hyun reaches his breaking point and contemplates killing Ji Young to put an end to what he sees as madness. Ji Young breaks free and offers Jo Hyun a deal. If Jo Hyun can prove the law still works by bringing Sam-doo and General Jae-hyob to justice, Ji Young will join forces with him. However, if Jo Hyun fails, Ji Young will take matters into his own hands to stop their crimes. The next day, General Jae-hyob calls Jo Hyun, instructing him to step down as the lead investigator. When Jo Hyun asks if this is related to the recent case, General Jae-hyob tells him to ignore media speculation and resign immediately, raising Jo Hyun's suspicions. Meanwhile, Ji Young tasks Gangok with setting up a studio for Mirio, giving her a platform to openly discuss vigilante and expose Sam-doo and General Jae-hyob. When Mirio questions his intentions, Gangok explains that his goal is to track down the vigilante. Mirio reveals her plan to expose Sam-doo's crimes and push government agencies to investigate. Gangok supports her, emphasizing they're on the same side. Mirio launches her show, rallying public support against Sam-doo and General Jae-hyob. She boldly declares that she won't take her own life, warning that if she dies, it will be due to murder. Through her platform, she reveals that the true vigilante is actively fighting against these criminals. As her broadcasts gain traction, General Jae-hyob grows enraged as public opinion begins to turn against him. Nam Yeon-gil is appointed as the new task force leader assigned to capture the vigilante. Upon taking over, he immediately disbands the existing team. Meanwhile, Ji Young dives into the diary he took after eliminating Yoon-sik. To his shock, it exposes that Pastor Shin from the team is involved in laundering money and managing funds for Sam-doo and Jae-hyob. Ji Young tracks one of Sam-doo's associates in the middle of transferring money between foreign accounts and ambushes him, knocking him out cold. He confiscates a USB drive containing incriminating evidence of Pastor Shin's money laundering operations for Sam-doo and Jae-hyob. While inspecting his surroundings, Ji Young spots Gangok outside the window. When he investigates further, Gangok suddenly takes off running, prompting Ji Young to chase him down. After catching him, Ji Young questions why he tried to flee, to which Gangok admits he finds it exhilarating. Ji Young decides to cooperate with him, but insists that Gangok reveal his face. Following Ji Young's demand, Gangok removes his mask. Ji Young hands him the USB, instructing him to deliver it to Mirio. The plan is to take down Pastor Shin while having Mirio expose the USB's contents, creating a public outcry. Using their powerful financial and political ties, Ji Young anticipates that Sam-doo and Jae-hyob will likely avoid prosecution, which sets the stage for his ultimate goal, targeting Sam-doo and exposing more evidence. Gangok, however, warns Ji Young that going after Sam-doo could cost him his life. Ji Young remains resolute, asserting that dying in pursuit of justice wouldn't be a regretful end to his journey. Ji Young storms into Pastor Shin's office, taking out his guards with swift precision. Despite Pastor Shin's attempt to flee, Ji Young catches up and, in a grim moment, strangles him to death. News of Pastor Shin's killing spreads quickly, attributing it to the vigilante, leaving the religious community in shock just as Ji Young had predicted. The plan then moves into its next phase, delivering the evidence against Pastor Shin to Mirio. Fully aware that he might be the next target, General Jae-hyob urgently contacts Sam-doo. Unshaken, Sam-doo reveals his counterplan, eliminating Mirio, Jo Hyun, and the vigilante in one fell swoop to clean up the mess. Meanwhile, Gangok delivers the USB to Mirio, claiming he has a team investigating and collecting evidence. As Mirio starts an online broadcast exposing the truth about Pastor Shin, we see Mr. Bang and his right-hand man heading toward their next mission. Jo Hoon rushes to Mirio's office to interrupt her broadcast, warning her not to glorify the vigilante just for ratings. He cautions her that she's inviting trouble and putting herself in harm's way. Despite his stern advice, Mirio remains determined to follow through with her mission. As Jo Hoon exits the building, he's ambushed by Mr. Bang, who tries to stab him. Jo Hoon blocks the attack and counters by slamming Mr. Bang into the car's front seat, unleashing a series of punches. However, during their struggle, Mr. Bang escapes, and Jo Hoon is blindsided by Mr. Bang's powerful right-hand man, who proves to be just as strong as Jo Hoon. Thrown against the car door, Jo Hoon fights back and briefly gains the upper hand. But Mr. Bang intervenes at a critical moment, giving his partner a chance to recover and attack Jo Hoon again. While restrained by the right-hand man, Jo Hoon is stabbed in the abdomen by Mr. Bang, causing excruciating pain. Despite his injuries, Jo Hoon musters enough strength to bring both attackers down. However, the severe blood loss leaves Jo Hoon unable to continue the fight. Just as things take a dire turn, Ji Young suddenly appears and confronts Mr. Bang, forcing him to flee. Ji Young saves Jo Hyun's life, but he slips away before anyone can recognize him. Security cameras, however, capture Ji Young in action, fighting off the attackers and aiding Jo Hoon. News of the incident reaches Gangok, who questions why Ji Young saved Jo Hoon. Ji Young reveals his true intention. He plans to turn Jo Hoon into a vigilante. Meanwhile, Samdu vents his frustration at Mr. Bang for failing to kill Jo Hoon. Mr. Bang, however, pushes back, telling Samdu to back off and let him handle things his way. At the same time, Samdu's men focus on extracting private keys for QQ coins from a server. Their work is interrupted when smoke fills the building. Amid the chaos, Ji Young emerges from the fire, attacking the men and knocking them out. Taking advantage of the confusion, Ji Young seizes the private keys and leaves the building as the flames engulf the office. On his way out, he leaves behind a bag full of cash. In an orphanage, Ji Young leaves a cryptic message in Samdu's office. "I've got the private keys. I plan to sell the QQ coin and donate the money. Before I make the donations, Samdu, Jae Hyop, and the hitman should surrender." Mirio broadcasts this revelation on her channel, presenting compelling evidence of Samdu's involvement in money laundering. Previously lacking proof, government agencies now have enough to arrest and pursue Samdu. Feeling the pressure, Samdu confronts Jae Hyop at his residence, leveraging his knowledge of the QQ coin's intended use for political funding. To ease the situation, Jae Hyop proposes a deal: a 6-month jail sentence for Samdu to help him distance himself from public scrutiny. Furious and frustrated, Samdu lashes out at his right-hand man for failing to capture the vigilante and stop Mirio from exposing their crimes. Meanwhile, Mr. Bang takes matters into his own hands by orchestrating the murder of the orphanage owner. He cleverly stages the scene to make it look like the vigilante's doing. However, both the media and the police suspect it's the work of a criminal organization targeting the vigilante. Recognizing the danger and the need to stop further innocent casualties, Ji Young reaches out to Gangok late at night. Despite knowing that Samdu is trying to lure out the vigilante, Ji Young feels compelled to act. He specifically instructs Gangok to watch over Mirio, knowing her life is now in danger. As expected, Samdu's right-hand man and his crew gather outside Mirio's building with malicious intentions. Detecting the threat through CCTV cameras, Mirio quickly sets up smaller cameras in her studio and starts live streaming the unfolding attack. She updates the public in real time about her dire situation. The assailants soon notice the surveillance devices and destroy them, wreaking havoc in their search for Mirio. Despite their efforts, Mirio continues to keep the public informed until they find her and destroy her phone, cutting off the live stream. Just as they're about to abduct her, Gangok arrives armed with a baseball bat, fighting off the attackers and saving Mirio in the nick of time. When Yeon-gil and his team rush to Mirio's studio after seeing the live stream, they find the place empty. To their surprise, Mirio is sitting there calmly, as if nothing happened. Taken to the police station, she is questioned about how she escaped such a dangerous situation. Choosing to keep Gangok's identity a secret, Mirio vaguely suggests that someone must have come to her aid after seeing the broadcast. Later, Mirio returns home and decides to relax with a bath. Suddenly, the lights go out, signaling the presence of an intruder in her apartment. Meanwhile, at the police academy, Yeon-gil confronts Ji-young, suspecting him of leaving the academy on the night of Mirio's attack. Adding to the suspicion is the discovery that the phone used to sell cryptocurrency was activated on campus. Ji-young, now aware that Yeon-gil is investigating him, sets out to meet Gangok. Simultaneously, Officer Yeon-gil gathers more evidence at the academy. Officer Yoon later informs Yeon-gil that the forensic report on the phone's location is ready. Following the lead, Yeon-gil traces the phone's location to President Ye Hyob's office. It's revealed that Ji-young had activated the phone in Ye Hyob's office to frame him and divert suspicion. During the search, Ji-young also discovers a burner phone Jae Hyob used to contact Samdu. When Yeon-gil arrives and finds both phones, Jae Hyob confronts him, furious about the search of his office. Yeon-gil advises Jae Hyob to confess before the forensic reports incriminate him and then leaves. Feeling cornered, Jae Hyob takes drastic measures to avoid exposure. On his way to deliver the forensic reports, Yeon-gil's car is struck by a truck in a deliberate collision, leading to his tragic death. Meanwhile, Jo-hoon, still recovering from his injuries, learns of Yeon-gil's demise. Ji-young also receives the news and is deeply shaken. That night, Jo-hoon approaches Ji-young, who confides in him, revealing that he guided Officer Yeon-gil to the evidence against Jae Hyob. Fueled by anger over the death of an honest officer, Ji-young expresses his determination to take justice into his own hands. He declares his intent to personally hold everyone responsible for the tragic incident accountable, as he believes the system has failed to do so. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Mr. Bang has abducted Mirio under Ye Hyob's orders. She is being tortured to force her to reveal information about the vigilante, but Mirio remains strong and refuses to talk. At the same time, Gangok visits Mirio's apartment and discovers she's been kidnapped. He quickly informs Ji-young, and the two strategize their next steps. The vigilante heads to Samdu's office, confronting his men with force. Ji-young catches a thug in conversation with Samdu and intervenes, compelling him to read a message aloud. Ji-young proposes a deal. He'll return the private keys for the QQ coins in exchange for Mirio's release. Hearing this, Samdu contacts Mr. Bang, offering him 5 times the payment Jae Hyob promised if he releases Mirio. Initially resistant, Mr. Bang changes his mind when he learns Ji-young is coming to rescue her. Motivated by revenge for their previous encounter, he agrees to the deal. Samdu, however, orders his right-hand man to gather their entire crew to eliminate everyone involved, Mirio, Mr. Bang, and the vigilante. That night, Ji-young's friend Seon-wook visits him, expressing concern about Ji-young's absence from class. Although suspicious, Seon-wook refrains from pressing Ji-young for answers. Before leaving, he advises Ji-young to focus on his studies. Meanwhile, Jo-hoon, determined to avenge Yeon-gil's death, readies captured members of Samdu's gang for the impending confrontation. The next morning, Samdu heads to the stadium as per Ji-young's instructions. Mr. Bang, keeping his word, brings Mirio to the same location for the exchange. Samdu's men clear the area and focus on spotting the vigilante via the CCTV cameras. Eventually, they notice a man in a black hoodie entering the stadium. However, to their surprise, several others dressed in black follow. Gangok, using his influence as a businessman, has organized a themed concert with everyone wearing black. Mr. Bang arrives at the scene and decides to honor his promise. Samdu's men enter the stadium while Mr. Bang's right-hand man, Seodol, blends into the crowd to handle the exchange involving Mirio and the private keys. Spotting Ji-young, Seodol gives chase, but loses him in the sea of people. Taking advantage of the confusion, Ji-young grabs Mirio's hand and guides her away from the crowd. Seodol follows them, but Gangok strategically distracts Samdu's men, allowing Ji-young and Mirio to hide. Ji-young instructs Mirio to start a live stream. As Mirio begins broadcasting live, a fight breaks out between Seodol and Ji-young. Meanwhile, Jo-hoon, seeing the live stream during his workout, rushes to the stadium with the captured members of Samdu's gang. Chaos erupts as Samdu orders his men to kill everyone, including Mr. Bang, Gangok, Mirio, and the vigilante. Gangok fights Samdu's men on the ground level, while Ji-young battles others on top of a bus. Mirio captures the entire scene on her live stream. Learning about the situation, Ye Hyob's superior, the chairman who orchestrated everything, orders him to end the chaos immediately. Amid the intense fight, Ji-young faces capture. Mirio emerges from hiding, drawing attention away from him. As Samdu's men pursue Mirio, Ji-young intervenes to protect her. They seek refuge on a bus, but are relentlessly chased by Samdu's henchmen. Just then, Jo-hoon arrives, commanding everyone to surrender. Confusion arises when Mr. Bang sees his men wearing police vests. Ignoring Jo-hyun's orders, Samdu instructs his men to attack Jo-hoon. Samdu then turns his focus to Ji-young, wielding a knife. Ji-young struggles to defend himself, but gets overpowered until an unexpected ally, Seon-wook, arrives. In the ensuing fight, Seon-wook is stabbed by Samdu. Ji-young manages to subdue Samdu, but the arrival of police cars forces everyone to scatter. Ji-young chases after Samdu, determined to capture him. As Samdu's men try to stop him, Gangok intervenes, giving Ji-young the chance to continue his pursuit. A final confrontation unfolds between Samdu, Mr. Bang, and Ji-young. Jo-hoon jumps into the fray, and chaos erupts as a brawl breaks out between them. Jo-hoon takes on Mr. Bang while Ji-young faces off with Samdu. Suddenly, the door to what seems like a huge water storage tank slams shut, and Jae-hyob reveals himself. He berates Samdu for his business failures before fatally shooting him. Armed with a gun, Jae-hyob begins firing at the others, forcing them to dive for cover. Jae-hyob manipulates the valves of the water tank, flooding the area. As he reloads his pistol, he continues firing at Jo-hoon and Ji-young. When the revolver runs empty, Jo-hoon helps Ji-young climb a nearby structure. In a brutal confrontation, Ji-young successfully takes down Jae-hyob on a metal bridge. Filled with rage, Ji-young unleashes a series of relentless punches on Jae-hyob. However, Jo-hoon intervenes, reminding Ji-young that their mission is complete and the law should handle the rest. In a sudden twist, Mr. Bang throws a knife at Ji-young, injuring him. Jae-hyob grabs a pistol and fires at Jo-hoon, Mr. Bang, and Ji-young, wounding all of them. Frustrated by Jae-hyob's actions, Jo-hoon decides to take matters into his own hands. He delivers a powerful punch to Jae-hyob's face, then suffocates him to death. Amid the chaos, Mr. Bang tries to attack Jo-hoon, but Ji-young intervenes and fatally stabs Mr. Bang in the chest. The aftermath of the intense fight turns the area into a scene swarmed with police and media. Later, Mirio is called in for questioning. During the interrogation, she reveals that Seon-wook, who was killed, was the vigilante. However, she refuses to reveal the true identity behind the vigilante. The next day, Gangok regains consciousness in his bed, receiving treatment. It's revealed that his right-hand man, Ji-young, took care of him and erased all the CCTV footage. Meanwhile, Ji-young mourns the loss of his close friend Seon-wook. Later, in a conversation with Jo-hoon, Mirio opens up about how her father was unjustly accused, leading to his death. Shockingly, no one stepped forward to help, even when they knew the truth. This heartbreaking incident led Mirio to support the vigilante, someone she saw as a symbol of hope, a person who stood up for the powerless. However, as she watches Ji-young grieve for his friend, she's unsure if he's still fit to continue as the vigilante. But as the drama unfolds, we see the flames of vigilantism burning brighter in Ji-young's eyes. He's more determined than ever to expose the chairman, the mastermind behind it all.